Family helps each other. Why are you so ungrateful? Dad yelled when I refused to pay their mortgage. I moved out that night. 3 months later, they were desperate. I stood there, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, my father's voice still echoing in my ears. Family helps each other. Why are you so ungrateful? The words were thick with accusation, his face red with fury. My mother sat at the table, arms crossed, lips pursed in silent agreement. They had asked, no, expected, me to cover their mortgage this month. Again. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a plea. It was a demand. I had heard this speech 100 times before. Ever since I got my first real paycheck, they treated me like a second income, a safety net they never planned for themselves. First, it was small things, groceries, a bill here or there. Then car repairs. Then vacations. And now? Now, they wanted me to save their house. I clenched my jaw, my chest tight. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, my voice steady. I have my own life. My own bills. My father scoffed. Your life? You live alone, you have no wife, no kids, what do you need all that money for? We raised you, we sacrificed for you, and now when we need you, you turn your back on us? I almost laughed at that. Sacrificed for me? They never helped with college. Never supported my dreams. Every extra dollar I had ever made had been funneled back into their never-ending needs. And now I was the selfish one? I exhaled through my nose. I won't do it. You need to figure this out yourselves. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my father slammed his fist on the table. Fine. If that's how it's gonna be, get out. If you can't be part of this family, then don't bother staying in this house. I stared at him, waiting for my mother to say something, to soften the blow. But she just looked away, as if I had already ceased to exist in her mind. A strange calm washed over me. Okay, I said simply. And I walked upstairs to pack my bags. I packed quickly. Years of being treated like a walking ATM had already prepared me for this moment. I had my own place, a modest apartment I had been renting for a while, just in case. I guess, deep down, I had always known this day would come. As I shoved clothes into my suitcase, I could hear my parents whispering downstairs. My dad's voice was still heated, but now it was hushed, like he didn't want me to hear. My mother's voice was softer, but there was no urgency, no desperation, no regret. They didn't think I'd actually leave. They thought I'd cave like I always had. I zipped up my suitcase, grabbed my work laptop, and took one last look at the room I grew up in. It was funny, really. This house, this place they were so desperate for me to save, had never truly felt like home. When I walked downstairs, my father was standing by the door, arms crossed, still furious. My mother was beside him, arms wrapped around herself like she was the victim. You'll regret this, she said, shaking her head. I gave a small shrug. Maybe. But at least I'll finally know what it feels like to live for myself. My dad scoffed. You're turning your back on family. No, I said calmly. I'm just done being used. Then I walked out. I half expected them to stop me, to call my name, to tell me I was overreacting. But they didn't. They just let me go. And as I drove away, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I was free. I didn't cry. I didn't second-guess myself. I didn't even feel that pang of guilt that usually came after standing up to my parents. Instead, I felt relief. The drive to my apartment was quiet, almost peaceful. No angry texts. No missed calls. Just silence. It was almost disappointing. I thought they'd at least put up a fight, try to reel me back in. But no. They really thought I'd come crawling back on my own. That first night alone in my apartment, I slept better than I had in years. No stress, no obligations hanging over me like a dark cloud. When I woke up, I made coffee, sat on my small balcony, and actually enjoyed the morning without worrying about how much money I'd have to send my parents this week. And that was when it truly sank in. For the first time in my life, every single dollar I made was mine. I spent the next few weeks catching up on my own life. I finally bought new work clothes instead of re-wearing the same worn-out button-ups. I upgraded my car, a practical, used sedan, but still better than the junker I'd been driving while paying for my parents' luxuries. I started going to the gym, focusing on my health. Most importantly, I saved. Without my parents draining my bank account, my savings account actually started to grow. I saw numbers I never thought I'd see. And then, 3 months later, the call came. I was at work when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But curiosity got the best of me. I answered with a simple, "Hello? Sweetheart." My mother's voice was different, high-pitched, frantic. "We need to talk. It's important." I leaned back in my chair. "What's going on?" A pause. Then, in a much quieter voice, she said, "We're in trouble." I smirked to myself. Here it comes. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, feigning concern. She let out a shaky sigh. "The house. We're—" She hesitated, then forced the words out. "We're losing it." I closed my eyes for a moment, soaking in the irony. They had called me ungrateful. Selfish. They told me to leave because I wouldn't keep bailing them out. And now? Now they were desperate. "We fell behind on payments," she continued. "Your father, he thought we could catch up, but you kept spending." I finished for her. "Didn't you?" Silence. I knew exactly what had happened. My parents had lived irresponsibly for years, treating my money as their safety net. When I left, that net disappeared, and instead of cutting back and budgeting, they had continued their old habits. Vacations. Shopping sprees. Expensive nights out. And now? Now they had nothing. "Listen, honey," she said, her voice suddenly softer, the same fake sweetness she always used when she wanted something. "We just need a little help. If you could lend us some money, just this one time, we can fix this. We can put everything behind us and be a family again." I almost laughed. Just this one time? That's what they had said the first time I covered their bills. And the second. And the 100th. I leaned forward, my voice calm and even. "You mean like how I asked for help, and you threw me out?" "That was different," she said quickly. We were upset, we didn't mean it." "Yeah?" I said. "Well, I did." Her breath hitched. "John, please. We're going to lose the house." I glanced at my bank app, at my steadily growing savings. I could afford to help them. I could have written them a check that same day and made all their problems disappear. But why should I? I thought about all the times they made me feel guilty for wanting my own life. The years of sacrifices, the vacations they took while I worked overtime just to pay their bills. The way my father had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't part of the family if I didn't pay up. So I smiled. "That sounds like a you problem, Mom," I said. Then, before she could respond, I hung up. And I swear, that moment felt better than anything money could buy. The calls didn't stop. After I hung up on my mother, she called again. And again. Then came the texts. At first, they were pleading. "Mom, John, please. Call me back. We can fix this. Mom, your father is stressed out, and I don't know what to do. Just help us this one last time." Then the guilt trips. "Mom, I raised you. I sacrificed for you. How can you turn your back on us? Dad, you're acting like a selfish brat. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us?" I ignored every single one. Then, after 2 days of silence, my father called. Unlike my mother's desperate, syrupy pleading, his voice was cold, controlled. "You think you're proving a point?" he said. "You're just showing us how ungrateful you are." I smirked. "I don't think I'm proving a point, Dad." "I know I am." He exhaled sharply. "We're going to lose the house, John. Your mother is beside herself. If that happens, what are we supposed to do?" "You figure it out," I said, mirroring the same dismissive tone he had used on me 3 months ago. "Just like I had to." His voice turned sharp. "You think you're better than us now? Just because you have some money saved up?" "No," I said calmly. I just think I'm done being used. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. This isn't over, he finally muttered, then hung up. I smiled to myself. Oh, but it was. Over the next month, I watched from the sidelines as everything fell apart for them. First, they tried to borrow money from relatives. But without me covering their bills, everyone quickly realized just how irresponsible they had been. No one wanted to lend them a dime. Then they tried selling off furniture and valuables, but it barely made a dent in what they owed. By the time the foreclosure notice was official, my mother sent one last, desperate message. Mom, we have nowhere to go. Please, John. We're still your parents. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something even better. I bought their house at auction. I had been keeping an eye on the foreclosure process, and when it finally went up for auction, I made my move. With the money I had saved, money that would have been gone if I had kept bailing them out, I placed a bid. And I won. It was the ultimate full-circle moment. The house that they had kicked me out of, the house they had demanded I pay for, was now mine. And I had no intention of letting them live in it. The day the house was officially mine, my parents showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to see my mother in tears, my father looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. They looked exhausted, like the weight of their own failures had finally caught up to them. We have nowhere to go, my mother whispered. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. That's not my problem. My father glared at me, but he was too beaten down to argue. Instead, my mother stepped forward, trying one last time. John, please, she said, voice trembling. Family helps each other. I tilted my head, pretending to consider her words. Then I smiled. You're right, Mom. Family does help each other. Hope flickered in her eyes. Then I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. So help yourselves, like I had to. And with that, I shut the door in their faces. For the first time in my life, I wasn't their safety net. And it felt incredible. I half expected them to start banging on the door, screaming like they had every right to demand my help. But they didn't. For the first time, my parents had nothing left to say. I watched from the window as they stood there for a few minutes, as if waiting for me to change my mind. My mother wiped her eyes. My father shook his head in disbelief. Then, without another word, they walked away. I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. For years, I had been their crutch, their personal ATM, their last resort. And now, they had to face the reality they had created. That night, I slept better than I ever had before. But I knew this wasn't over yet. The silence didn't last long. A week after I shut the door on them, my mother called again. This time, her voice was calm, almost too composed. We've been thinking, she said. Maybe we could work something out. I almost laughed. Oh? Like what? You own the house now, she said carefully. Maybe we could rent it from you. Just until we get back on our feet. I let that sit for a moment. They wanted me to let them live in the house they had kicked me out of. The same house they had demanded I pay for, then thrown me away when I refused. And now? Now they wanted me to be their landlord. No, I said simply. She sucked in a breath. John, please. I'm done, Mom, I interrupted. Find somewhere else. Then I hung up. This time, she didn't call back. But I knew they weren't giving up that easily. A few days after that call, my sister reached out. Unlike my parents, she hadn't said much during the whole ordeal. She had never been the golden child, but she also never stood up for me. She was always just there, going along with whatever our parents said. So when her name popped up on my phone, I hesitated before answering. Hey, she said. Her voice was cautious, like she knew I wouldn't want to hear from her. I sighed. What do you want? I wanted to talk, she said. Mom and Dad are staying in a motel. They don't have much money left. I stayed silent, waiting. They're scared, John. They don't know what to do. I almost laughed. They're scared? That was rich. Where was this sympathy when they were throwing me out like I was disposable? She must have sensed my thoughts because she quickly added, "Look, I'm not saying what they did was right. But they're still our parents." I shook my head. No. They were parents to you. To me? I was a paycheck. That's not fair, she mumbled. I clenched my jaw. You sat there and watched it happen. You never once told them they were wrong. She didn't have a response for that. Finally, she exhaled. They don't have anywhere to go, John. I'm just asking you to. No. Silence. I let out a slow breath, calming myself before continuing. I get that you feel bad for them. But I don't owe them anything. They made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. She didn't argue. Instead, she sighed again, this time sounding more resigned than before. I don't want this to destroy our family completely. That made me pause. I had spent my whole life being the one who fixed things. The one who made sure everyone else was okay, even at my own expense. But this wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I had walked away once. And I wasn't about to turn back now. I guess that's up to them, I finally said. Then, before she could say anything else, I ended the call. I didn't hear from her again. And for the first time, I realized something. I wasn't losing my family. I was finally free from them. Weeks passed, and my parents seemed to disappear. No more calls. No more guilt trips. No more desperate attempts to manipulate me. I assumed they had finally figured something out. Maybe they found a smaller place. Maybe they begged one of my relatives for help. Either way, I didn't care. Then, one evening, I got a text from a neighbor near my parents' old house. Neighbor, hey, I saw your folks outside the house today. Thought you should know. I frowned. That didn't make sense. They had no reason to be there anymore. The house was mine now. Curious, I drove over. As I pulled up, my stomach tightened. My parents were standing in the driveway, staring at the house like they were still trying to claim ownership over it. My father's hands were on his hips, my mother wiping at her eyes. I rolled down my window. What are you doing here? They turned to face me, startled. My mother took a hesitant step forward. We just wanted to see it one last time, she murmured. This house, it meant so much to us. I nearly laughed. Now it meant something to them? Not when they spent years living recklessly, assuming I would always pick up the pieces? Not when they threw me out the second I refused to be their personal bank? I stepped out of the car, crossing my arms. You didn't care about this house when you thought I'd pay for it. You only care now because you lost it. My father scowled, but he looked tired. Older. Like the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. We screwed up, he muttered, barely able to get the words out. All right? Is that what you want to hear? I tilted my head. I don't want to hear anything from you. I just want to make sure you're not stupid enough to try anything. My mother flinched. We wouldn't. I held up a hand. Good. Then this is over. They stood there, silent. Defeated. I let the moment stretch between us, then finally turned back to my car. As I opened the door, my mother whispered, John, do you really hate us that much? I paused, gripping the handle tightly. Then I sighed. No, I said. But I love myself more. Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving them standing in the past where they belong. That was the last time I saw them in person. I expected at least one more desperate attempt. Maybe another phone call, maybe my mother showing up at my apartment, crying about how she had nowhere to go. But it never came. Instead, I heard everything secondhand. My aunt, the only relative I still spoke to, called me a few weeks later. I just got off the phone with your mom, she said. They're staying at some rundown motel. Your dad's been looking for work, but well, you know how he is. Yeah. I knew. He had never been one to work hard when there was an easier option, like getting me to pay for everything. They wanted me to ask you if there's anything you'd be willing to do, she added carefully. I sighed. I've already done everything. It's their turn. My aunt was quiet for a moment, then she chuckled. You know, I think they're finally realizing that. I smirked. Took them long enough. She hesitated before speaking again. I don't think they ever thought this would happen, John. I think they assumed you'd always give in. I nodded, already knowing she was right. My parents had never planned for the future because, in their minds, I had always been the future. But that wasn't my role anymore. I hope they figure things out, I said, meaning it. But I'm not their solution. My aunt sighed, but there was no judgment in it. Just understanding. I get it. I just thought you should know. We hung up, and I stared at my phone for a while. For years, I had been the foundation of my parents' lives. The one who kept things steady while they burned through money, expecting me to clean up the mess. Now, they had to stand on their own. And I was perfectly okay with that. Months passed. Then a year. I never reached out to my parents, and they never reached out to me. Maybe they were too ashamed. Maybe they were too stubborn. Either way, I didn't care. In that time, my life flourished in ways I never imagined. Without them draining my bank account, I finally bought my first home, a place that was mine, not something I was forced to save for someone else. My savings continued to grow. I traveled. I invested in things that mattered to me. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. And I never once looked back. I heard from my aunt every now and then. My parents had bounced around different motels, relying on distant relatives who eventually got tired of their excuses. My father struggled to keep a steady job. My mother, once so confident that they would always have a safety net, had finally learned what it felt like to be abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on me. One day, my aunt called and hesitated before saying, "They're still struggling, you know." I waited, sensing where this was going. "They haven't outright asked for help again," she added quickly. "But I can tell they're hoping you'll come around." I chuckled. "Then they're in for a long wait." My aunt sighed, but she didn't argue. She knew. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with it.